Welcome to the Explainer. Okay, let's jump right in because we have a truly wild topic to unpack today. We're diving headfirst into a mind-bending analysis by Dr. Nuthawood Vatrakoldalak that is frankly going to completely deconstruct how you view your own identity. We are pitting two massive philosophical titans against each other to try and answer the ultimate question: what exactly is the self?
Let's kick things off with a quick experiment. Right now, in this exact second, I want you to try and locate the self inside your head that's listening to my words. Where's the you that is currently processing this? Is it sitting right behind your eyes? Is it that little voice inside your head? Maybe you feel it in your chest? It feels incredibly real, doesn't it? It feels like an undeniable, rock-solid fact that there's a you in there piloting the ship.
Before we go any further, we need to establish a baseline. In our everyday, modern view, we generally define the self, or the ego, as this feeling of a continuous, independent me. It's the agent. Well, actually, it's the feeling of an agent existing behind our eyes that experiences the world, suffers through the bad days, celebrates the good ones, and makes conscious choices. We're going to use this common, everyday understanding as our starting point, our target, really, so we have a solid concept to philosophically dismantle over the next few minutes.
All right, let's move into our first major paradigm. Part 1, the true self in the Bhagavad Gita. This deeply comforting, foundational theory of identity comes from one of the absolute most important texts in Hindu philosophy. The Gita frames this whole idea through an intense dialogue between the divine Krishna and a warrior named Arjuna. Arjuna is standing on a literal battlefield, completely paralyzed by doubt and anguish, and Krishna's response to his suffering is this profound lesson on who we actually are. He introduces Arjuna to the concept of the Atman. He says, look, deep down, beneath all your anxiety and your physical reality, there is a true self. This Atman is an immortal, completely unchanging core. It can't be destroyed, it was never born, and it exists eternally. It completely transcends your temporary physical body and your shifting thoughts. So according to this text, you have an indestructible inner essence that is 100% safe from the chaos of the outside world.
This sets up a really elegant framework for understanding human suffering. The Gita basically separates reality into two separate buckets. Over in bucket 1, you have the true self, the Atman. Over in bucket 2, you have the outer illusion, which is known as Maya. The text explains that all of our suffering happens because we mistakenly cling to bucket 2. We cling to our physical bodies, our messy minds, our social status, and we think, hey, that's me. But it's not. They're just illusions. True enlightenment, then, is separating your pure, observing inner core from all that messy, temporary reality.
So you might be wondering, how does the Gita advise us to actually live our lives if everything around us is basically an illusion? The answer is a practice called nishkama karma. This is the practice of doing your duty without any attachment whatsoever to the fruits or the results of your action. You essentially act as a detached witness. You do exactly what needs to be done in the world, but you separate your inner, true self from the outcomes. You just don't get tangled up in it. It's this highly refined, incredibly subtle way of living that perfectly insulates your immortal core from the turbulence of life.
But hold on to your hats, because we are about to shift gears completely. Part 2, Antithesis, Nagarjuna and the Empty Illusion. If the Bhagavad Gita just built this beautiful, comforting fortress around your eternal soul, the 2nd century Buddhist philosopher Nagarjuna is about to systematically pull the rug out from under everything we just talked about. The absolute cornerstone of his entire philosophy is Sunyata, which translates to emptiness. Now, let's be super clear here. Emptiness is not some depressing nihilism. He isn't saying nothing exists at all. Instead, it's the radical concept that absolutely all phenomena lack any intrinsic independent nature. Everything only arises dependently, based on other conditions. Nothing exists entirely on its own. Everything is interconnected and constantly shifting.
So what does this mean for our sense of identity? I mean, if everything is empty of an independent essence, what exactly is the self? Well, according to Nagarjuna, the me you feel inside your head is basically just a recipe made of temporary ingredients. It's stitched together by mental formations, it relies heavily on memory, and it's sustained purely by our habit of clinging to name and form. Nagarjuna looks at the self not as some immortal core, but merely as a fleeting illusion that arises from these cognitive processes constantly interacting.
You can really see the stark contrast here when you put them head to head. The Gita offers us this witness consciousness, a pure, existing observer that gets to stand safely apart from the world. But Nagarjuna looks at that exact same concept and says, nope, that is still just a mental fabrication. For him, there is no solid, eternal soul hiding in the background pulling the strings. Even the feeling of being a detached observer is just another illusion created by a shifting web of conditions.
Which brings us to part 3, the ultimate philosophical clash, empty me versus true self.
The board is set, so let's see how these paradigms directly collide. How does Nagarjuna's ultimate empty me dismantle the Gita's true self? He has 3 main critiques. First, he argues that the Gita's Atman is still a thing that someone is claiming exists. But for Nagarjuna, even emptiness itself must be empty. You literally cannot grasp onto an eternal soul. Second, he flat out rejects the idea that there's a true self hiding behind a false ego. He argues that all levels of self are illusory. And third, he points out a really sneaky hidden trap in the Gita. Even practicing non-attachment requires an agent who is actively trying not to attach.
Looking at these side by side, you have 2 completely opposite paths to enlightenment. For the Gita, your true nature is that immortal Atman. For Nagarjuna, it's just a conditional illusion. When we talk about the root of suffering, the Gita says the problem is clinging to the false ego. Nagarjuna says no, the problem is clinging to any concept of self, even a supposedly pure spiritual one. And finally, for liberation, the Gita wants you to realize your true self. But for Nagarjuna, liberation means realizing the self never existed in the first place.
And this leads to what is honestly Nagarjuna's most devastating question. It's a paradox that catches so many people completely off guard. Think about it. If you are actively trying to let go of your ego or trying super hard to be unattached, isn't that intention just your ego playing a new, slightly more advanced spiritual game? No matter how pure or subtle the intention is, if there's a you trying to achieve enlightenment, you are still assuming an agent exists at the center of the whole thing. So how on earth do we resolve this? Part 4, Synthesis, Dissolving the Seeker.
We've got this massive philosophical knot now. How do we resolve the tension between wanting to be free and the realization that the wanting itself is the trap? Well, here's the huge breakthrough. Genuine liberation is not about purifying yourself. It's not about saving yourself or detaching yourself from the world. You literally cannot save the seeker because the very act of seeking just reinforces the illusion of a separate me. True liberation is just seeing right through the mirage. It's recognizing that the self never existed at all.
Okay, so if the illusion finally drops away, what is left? If there's no self, what's actually there? The term for this is tathata, which beautifully translates to suchness. When the seeker dissolves, there's no one left to let go, and no one left to attain anything. What remains is simply reality unfolding purely according to conditions. Life is still happening, the present moment is absolutely still here, but it is completely devoid of an owner. There's no agent at the center of it experiencing it. It's just suchness.
And that brings us to this ultimate mic drop realization that perfectly distills the entirety of Nagarjuna's critique. The seeker never really existed from the beginning. There was never a ghost in the machine. Imagine spending your entire life trying to solve the problem of you, only to suddenly discover that the ultimate answer isn't a better, more spiritual version of you. The answer is the realization that the question itself was fundamentally flawed from day one. That is what true freedom looks like in this philosophy.
As we wrap up today's explainer, I want to leave you with one final thought to chew on. If there is no seeker to improve, and no eternal soul that desperately needs to be saved, what becomes possible for you right now? If you just stop trying to fix or protect the you behind your eyes, how does that fundamentally change the way you will live this exact moment? Thank you so much for exploring this with me today. I really hope this leaves you with something fascinating to think about.